Very warm welcome back to my Instagram live here from the Kenya coast, where it is very hot. Not expecting any sympathy, but I'm going to have to keep dabbing my face because it is very humid. Actually, when I arrived, it was tipping with rain, so I obviously brought that with me from the UK. But right now, oh my gosh, really hot. Where in the world is everybody else? I would love to hear where you are. Are you away for half term maybe? Are you in the UK? I know lots of people join us from all over the world, from other parts of Africa, from the States, from Australia, all sorts. Nice to see you. Thank you for all your waves. Well, now, just before I left, we hit, obviously, 1st of November, and that means just one thing. That means it's the launch of the brand new issue of Earle Wellbeing magazine. Now, unfortunately, mine did not arrive. I know that all the subscribers are beginning to get theirs right now, popping through their letterboxes. So what I did was I printed out the front cover. It's a little bit pale, but this, look at our lovely cover star, my little Frankster, my little Frank. Everyone's saying, yeah, but where's Flossie? Okay, well, her turn next time. But yeah, this was taken a few months ago when he was just a wee kitten. Anyway, as you can see on the front cover, it's probably come out in reverse, it says, share the love. So this is the Christmas issue. This is the festive edition. It covers November and December. And it's all about love, and it is all about sharing the love. It's about sharing good things, and it's about connecting with people, and it's about obviously making festive food and gift giving and all of those things. But it's about loving ourselves, not in a selfish way, but self-love in terms of respecting ourselves and treating our bodies well and looking after our mental health, and also looking after our relationships, all kinds of relationships, whether they're work relationships, family, obviously our nearest and dearest, you know, our better halves perhaps. And so I'm really delighted that today we're going to be joined live, fingers crossed, with one of our amazing columnists. She's an incredible psychotherapist, Lucy Beresford. You may remember her name because I recorded a podcast with her not long ago. Absolutely brilliant. If you have not listened to that, then do please take a listen, particularly if you are in a relationship or wanting to improve on relationships. In particularly, we talked about what happens when relationships break down. We talked about divorce. We talked about relationship changes in midlife, and, you know, hands up, I got divorced not that long ago for the second time. Yeah, that's not a badge I'm proud of, but it was very interesting to talk through that whole kind of emotional roller coaster with a professional. And actually, for me personally, Lucy gave me lots of really helpful insights into my own feelings, and actually challenged me on quite a few things. And it is quite a personal podcast. It's quite raw. So yeah, it's always interesting when you're recording these things because you're never quite sure how they're going to go. And sometimes when the person I'm interviewing throws stuff back at me and says, yeah, but actually, Liz, maybe you could talk about this. And it's like, okay, this is really personal, but yeah, let's go. You know, I think that's what these open and honest conversations are all about, aren't they? So I'm going to see, hopefully we can get Lucy. Before I do that, I'm just going to check and see if we can have Lainey join as a moderator. So Lainey obviously is part of my team here at Earle Wellbeing, sadly not in Kenya, although she has been to Kenya because we've done photo shoots here. Because I've got family connections here. One of the reasons I'm here actually is to see my eldest son, Guy, who's based in Nairobi, who's working on some really interesting sustainability projects. And my charity, Live Twice, we have various projects going on across different parts of East Africa, actually, including Kenya. So I'm here to actually start something new. So I'm going to be doing that in the next few days. Hopefully, Lainey, have you joined as moderator? I can't see. Let's see whether we've got the bandwidth. The intercontinental bandwidth, which is what we need. Okay, maybe I'm just going to try one more time. Add moderator. Oh, it says I can only add one. Yeah, I tried to add Lainey. So anyway, okay, so Lainey may or may not be able to join, but Lucy is here. Will work because Lucy has just so much to say and is very thoughtful and very incisive. So if you've got any relationship questions, actually, Lainey's joined. Hi, lovely. Very nice to see you. And Lucy is here. Can you hear me, Lucy?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Yes, and I can hear you too. Where in the world are you?
I'm not in Kenya. I am in central London.
Okay. I was just saying, I don't know whether you heard my intro, but I was
Yeah.
so touched actually by so much of what you said in the podcast that we recorded. Do you want to just introduce your background and the sort of things that you deal with as a therapist?
Yes, thank you. Well, it was a really beautiful introduction that you gave me a few minutes ago, and I'm so grateful to you. But also, I'm so relieved that some of the things that I talked about really helped and helped you personally, because I think that's really all that I've ever wanted to do, is to put information out there that helps people and strengthens them in whatever journey they're going through. So, as you can imagine, as a psychotherapist and as a broadcaster, as someone who, does radio shows, does a lot of TV, I'm really hoping that I can give people the tools so that they can have the life that they want. And as you say, it doesn't just have to be around these sort of real milestone events in terms of relationships. It could be because they don't know what path to take in their career. I do a lot of career coaching and life coaching, but also people just come to me sometimes with more existential things around, what is there in life, and what can I do to make my life the life that I want? How can I manifest the life that I want?
Yeah, I love
So I
that.
think as a psychotherapist, since I've been training, I trained 22, 23 years ago, maybe even longer than that. I think the world of self-development has changed so much as we have thought a lot about self-worth. So for me, that's the cornerstone. And whatever you're going through in life, it's very much about how you can improve your self-worth and self-esteem.
Self-worth. Yeah, really, really key. And actually, I've just got, although I haven't got the physical printed copy of the magazine here with me, you've got a great, great article. And I did actually manage to get it on my iPad, because obviously wherever you are in the world, you can download it. And this is a great feature. This is you here. And it's called Moving On. And it actually says, a divorce, for example, may mark the end of a relationship, but it also ushers in a new chapter. And, one of the things that I was just going to share actually with in our circle of trust, that really struck me was when we talked about relationships, and I was asking you about navigating divorce. And obviously that is, it's a big thing for our community here. A lot of midlife women are affected by that. And, younger and older too. And it can be a massive change, and in some cases, very traumatic and a big shock. And I talked about having 2 failed marriages. I just kind of mentioned that as an aside. And you immediately jumped in and you picked me up on that. And you said, Liz, why do you say failed? And I said, well, obviously they failed because I'm not married anymore. So that is in itself a failure. I took my vows very seriously. I did not expect the relationships, the marriages not to work. So therefore, for me, clearly it's a failure. And you were really gentle and kind and said, actually, they were both long-term relationships, both of them about 17 years, producing great children, a lot of shared experiences, a lot of good times. That in itself is not a failure. But also, when you say a vow, like till death us do part, what do you mean? Do you mean the death of a person or the death of a relationship? And actually, relationships do die, and you can move on from that without feeling that you failed. For me, I don't know whether that makes sense, but it was hugely impactful and really, personally very helpful.
Oh gosh, I'm so glad. Yes, because I think it is very important to think about how we frame endings, and actually the way in which we live our life and the choices that we make will very often depend on how we frame something, how we view it. And if we look at it in very negative terms, if our language is very negative, if we do only see it through the prism of failure, then we're missing out on the most incredible opportunity to take some solace from what has happened and to really invest in ourselves and invest in whatever it took, for example, to maybe end the relationship. That it may well be that it took a lot of courage for someone to end a relationship, that they finally found their voice, for example, that they finally believed that they deserved to treat themselves with respect. None of that is a failure. And also, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, many people watching now, and certainly the slightly younger generation, they could live to 110, 120.
Oh, yes.
Do we really imagine that the
Oh,
people
yeah,
that
for
we
sure.
meet and fall in love with, you know, in our 20s or 30s? Are they going to be in our lives for that long? And it's okay to let that go. It's okay to let go of the fear that just because something has ended doesn't mean that it was wrong, doesn't mean that it was a failure, that actually there are a lot of positives around endings.
Yeah, and I guess what that does also is it validates what happened at the time, rather than just wiping it all off as that was all a complete disaster. Because, you know, I think in anything, isn't it, especially in relationships, there's always light and shade, and sometimes we lose that. And I think particularly for midlife women, it can be very complex because there's so much going on. We might be having children and looking after elderly parents and trying to find our way in the career sphere, and, you know, look after our own aging sense of who we are in society. Particularly as women, as we age, we can become that cloak of invisibility that can shroud us, and it is very easy to get lost in that. And I know that you help a lot of people with your therapy work who kind of navigate that transition of kind of, who am I? Because nobody stays the same. We're not static, are we? Hopefully we are always growing and moving forward and developing.
Yes, and one of the big things that I often say is you can only really make good choices for yourself by knowing yourself well, by knowing what it is that you want and who it is that you are, and how you've come to be the person that you are. And that self-knowledge is really precious. And it means that you have to see yourself as an individual as much as someone in a couple, for example, or as, you know, someone's daughter, or as someone's mother, or as someone's boss. That actually we're quite complicated creatures, and therefore it's important to explore every facet of our lives. And you do only have one life. This is my really big belief, that actually if there is something that isn't working, if there is something that is making you miserable or is making you feel small in any way, that's a really big whisper. That's a really big signal that you should pay attention to. And sometimes that can be hard, because what it might mean is, yes, something might have to end, something might have to change. And midlife is really interesting for the way that does throw up those moments, those opportunities for change, for growth. Whereas in the old day, I mean, there was a time, you know, when we only lived to about 45. So midlife kind of happened,
you know,
when you're, and not that long ago, exactly. And yet now we really need to embrace our potential. And I'm so glad you said right at the beginning, when you were sort of, you know, you were talking about how humid it was in Kenya, but also about how important it is to look after yourself in the round, to look after your body, to look after your mental well-being, to look after your skin, to look after your, you know, your intelligence and your brain capacity. That all of that is so important, because that's going to keep you strong for whatever comes. And I appreciate, as you hinted earlier, that there are some people who might be going through a relationship breakup or a divorce, not of their own choosing, and that's a very different place to be, to maybe someone who makes that choice, although it's still painful, even if you're the one that instigates it. But there was some really interesting research from Ashley Madison, the married dating website people. Interestingly enough, they brought out some interesting research about how progressive women are being, and I think that speaks to how, because we're taking control of so much of our life, the finances, our careers, whether things are working in friendship groups or in our family, that why would you also not expect to be in the driving seat of your relationship? And if your relationship is not fulfilling you, if it isn't meeting the needs that you feel are appropriate within a relationship, because you can't expect your partner to meet all of your needs, but I think it is appropriate that they meet some of your needs. And if that isn't happening, then you have a choice, and you have to dig deep to find the answers for that choice. But that's all possible, and that's all about your growth. I'm all about potential, really.
You're so encouraging, and, you know, honestly, everybody who has got the magazine or who will be receiving it soon, you know, do please turn to some of those back pages and read Lucy's feature, because it is just so wise. And I think, you know, for a lot of midlife women that I speak to, and I can certainly include myself in this, I look back particularly particularly kind of in my late 40s, maybe early 50s, and I kind of lost my sense of self. I lost me because, as you said earlier, we are very busy being somebody else's mother, wife, boss, friend, daughter, you know, whoever. And in all of this, you kind of suddenly think, but where am I in all of this? And also, it is a generational thing. My daughters, for example, you know, Lily's 32, Bella's 22. They're so much better at looking at themselves and their self-worth and how they need to live and grow without it being seen as being selfish. Whereas I think for my generation and for others, you know, older as well, it's seen as a little bit self-indulgent. And actually, we should just be there for others. And that, I think, can be a danger because we do lose ourselves.
Yeah, it's more than dangerous, actually. It is damaging. And also, I mean, if you think about those videos that you have on aeroplanes, you probably had it when you flew to Kenya just recently, that, you know, when they're talking to you about putting your oxygen mask on, if the cabin pressure falls, you know, the oxygen mask will fall. You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. And what I've noticed on multiple airlines is that that video invariably shows a grown-up putting their oxygen mask on before they put the one on the child. That image is usually a grown-up and a child. And I think they do that deliberately because the gut instinct, particularly of a parent or a grandparent, is to see to the children first. Got to get the oxygen mask on them. Well, you're not going to attach it properly if you're flailing around.
If you've got those few seconds, but
you've only got
a few seconds. You can't help anybody else.
So
that's it.
I think psychologically, the people who've made those videos have portrayed that image very specifically. And I think we need to take that out into the real world and say that it isn't about being selfish at all. It is about self-care. It is about looking after yourself to be able to be available to other people, that you can't show up as a good parent or a good spouse or even a good child if you're actually only people pleasing for everybody else. You will exhaust yourself, you'll deplete your resources, and you'll be no good for anybody. And that is, I think that is shifting a lot. I mean, I think society obviously framed things differently a couple of generations ago. But again, as the Ashley Madison report suggests, there are women out there who are running companies, they're CEOs, they're, you know, Kate Bingham led the vaccine task force. You've got, you know, senior politicians, you've got rock stars like Taylor Swift, who is now a billionaire, by taking control of the flow of her music, so she didn't sign the rights over to the big music companies. You've got female role models, you Liz in particular, you know, running a company, creating a brand, and people can look at that and think women can do anything. Women can do anything. So why would you not get that fulfillment in your relationship?
Yeah, and actually, you know, I've interviewed a lot of, you know, CEOs and very high-powered women over the years, you know, for my podcast and the rest, and they will all say, actually, yes, you know, they do run, you know, huge companies and they have great empires and whatever, but actually, when they get home and there's no milk in the fridge, it's still their fault. You know, it's like we're expected to take on so much of this. Is that a red flag?
Yes. Yes, and there's no, this isn't gender specific, but I think even if you're in a same-sex relationship and your partner is incapable of occasionally opening the fridge door and noticing that there is no milk, then you need to have conversations. This isn't about when you get into a relationship assuming that your partner ticks all the boxes. It's about working out what to do when you realize that they don't tick that particular box, and how, in a way, how you re-educate somebody. And ultimately, for sure, if you're in a relationship for long enough and you just think they're never going to do it, then of course you have a choice. Am I happy to stay with someone who never buys the milk? My husband always bought the milk. So I thought that was rather cool. Or it would be almond milk, actually, because I'm not very good with dairy. But there is a sense in which you still have a choice. How important is it that you are the person that then comes home from running your uber successful company and you still have to buy the milk, or are there other benefits? Because relationships are about compromise as well.
Yeah.
And what are you prepared to compromise, and what are your non-negotiables?
Very interesting. Talking to you, and I guess I've just written this book, A Better Second Half, and it has a big section actually on relationships, and you are quoted in it. It was very interesting looking at some of the new language, because certainly, when I was growing up and I was a younger woman navigating earlier relationships, and, we didn't use expressions like people pleasing, being a people pleaser. I'd never heard that expression until fairly recently. Even some of the very destructive relationships, issues that we talk about now, like coercive control, for example, is for me and my generation a relatively new thing. I can look back and I can see examples of that, and I can see it happening in friends' relationships and other lives as well. But that was something, maybe it's a generational thing, that is that something that's relatively newly recognized within therapy?
Well, I'll give you a slightly different example, which is another word that has been used a lot, often slightly taken out of context, and that's gaslighting, which is very linked to coercive control. But gaslighting as a term comes from a film in the 1930s about a man who steadily undermines his wife's sanity by doing things and then basically lying about them. So he turns down the level of gas in the lights, and she keeps saying, "Is it me, or is it getting really dark here?" And he says, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. You're mad. You're making this up." And that as a term, as I say, has been in the sort of parlance for decades, but it hasn't really been talked about as explicitly in the realms of relationships in quite the same detail nowadays. And we do hear a lot of, we've had court cases of domestic abuse and coercive control. And I think the more that we use this language, and the more we have a frame of reference to be able to say that there are certain things in relationships that are utterly unacceptable, which is why, I mean, in my TED talk, which is called Infidelity to Stay or to Go, I talk a lot about how you can survive betrayal and how a relationship can be strengthened as a result of the discovery of adultery or infidelity. But I do also state that if you then discover that this is happening on multiple occasions, or that someone comes back and then basically flouts all of the promises that they made, then of course you have permission to make a different choice. And so I think some of these phrases, they've been around and they've been very important, but they haven't been taken out of the therapy room into the mediums that I now work in, which is things like this, Insta Live, broadcasting on radio and television, where you talk about it at length and you basically hold it up for the red flag that it is to be in a relationship. And if you are treated with contempt on a daily basis, if you are undermined, if your self-worth is ridiculed, then these are patterns of behavior that may never change, and therefore you have to make a decision. Do I want to carry on living this kind of life where I'm playing small and where I'm not really respected, or do I get out and treat myself with respect?
Very interesting that you mentioned the words there, domestic abuse, because I think historically we've always really associated that with violence, domestic violence. And I think now there's a much greater understanding of the incredibly destructive and negative impact that verbal abuse, and I guess that brings us back to things like coercive control and gaslighting. And it can be incredibly toxic and demeaning, and it just erodes your sense of self-worth on every level. And it can start small, can't it? And you must hear this in the therapy room all the time and identify things. And it's almost as if sometimes midlife women are kind of waking up to this for the first time without realizing just how incredibly toxic, verbal abuse is, and can be as damaging and as painful as physical violence.
I think that's absolutely right. And it's really, really important that this gets talked about more, because you're drawing attention to the way in which it does start very subtly. And it often happens in relationships where there's been a lot of love bombing in the beginning. So you're hooked in, and you're thinking, well, this is fantastic. You know, this person is caring for me. They're opening the car door for me. They seem to be very supportive financially. They're very encouraging of everything I do. And then there will be these little moments, these little comments that are made, or maybe the drinking will start, and therefore under the guise of the alcohol, things will get said, which can then be easily dismissed as being under the influence.
Drunken moment. Yeah.
Yes, and I think what also happens, and this is where it becomes allied to gaslighting, there's a sort of Venn diagram of coercive control and gaslighting, and there's something in the middle where in public this person is very nice and kind and thoughtful and generous and not snappy and isn't quick to anger. And so the friendship group that you have don't see anything wrong. Whereas behind closed doors, what you're dealing with is repeated contempt, repeated dismissal of what you want to do and who you want to show up as. Or just the things that you do, the things that you value, a sort of rubbishing of you doing meditation, or you hanging out with that particular gang of friends, or the things that you might want to prioritize. There's a lot of minimization that goes on, and then it will start to appear in public, but very rarely. You're going to have to deal with this on your own. And if you are beginning to think there's a huge disconnect here between how everybody thinks my relationship is and my own personal experience of it. Are you constantly watching how much your partner is drinking? Are you always the first to leave events? Do your friends comment about the fact that you're always the first to leave events? Right. And is that your way of trying to desperately minimize the hostility that you will be on the receiving of at the end of the end of an evening? Or are you retreating from certain groups of friends because you just can't bear how your partner is when you hang around with those people? Not because they're enabling it, but because your partner is in a very different place. So I think it's you almost have to play detective within your own relationship and start to monitor some of this stuff. And I think that's where the gaslighting is useful. It's like, okay, I know that this could be gaslighting. What's my evidence for that? Keep a notebook, or if you worry that your partner might look in your notebook, keep it on your phone, keep it in your head, speak to a therapist, speak to a trusted friend, so that you don't go insane, so that you don't think, well, this is just, I must be wrong, I must have got this wrong. Because actually the chances are, as I say, that whisper will start to become louder and louder, and then you really will have to pay attention to the damage that it's doing to your mental health.
Do you think with some of the I'm thinking more specifically now about midlife women that you see, and you mentioned the TED talk that you do, should I stay, should I go? And that is a very live, very real issue, I know, for lots of people, and I've been there, I've walked that path myself. Do you think that it's a question of people staying together because they're afraid of being alone, and that's not what they're used to, and that is such a huge step and such a great unknown, particularly for midlife women, that actually they think, do you know what, I know this is damaging, I know this is not great, but actually I'm so terrified of living on my own and maybe having to confront who I am and how I'm going to deal with that actually it's better just to stay?
I think it's different for different people, because I think for sure there is a cohort of people whose self-worth has been diminished for so long because of the relationship, because perhaps if there has been infidelity, maybe there have been other elements of contempt or dismissal or lies, confusion, lack of intimacy, a lack of emotional support that has then weakened your sense of self. So I think that can also compromise your ability to believe that you will be able to survive on your own. Right. And I think for certain women, there is a great fear of how will I survive financially. And this is not to minimize people who might think, well, you know, I have a very particular standard of living at the moment, and if I'm forced to live on my own and fund myself, my standard of living may be severely compromised. I don't think we should judge anyone who makes that judgment call,
Right.
who says that actually, okay, that's the trade-off I'm going to make to myself, that I'm going to stay for the money, or I'm going to stay for the access that I have, for, you know, some kind of
Status,
stability.
maybe, in, you know, within society.
Yeah, I think there could be some situations where you think, well, I just don't want to present myself as a single person or as a divorced person. I fear that, you know, I think sometimes socially it can be quite difficult. I know many women who, you know, it's the husband who gets invited, or the ex-husband who gets invited to all the dinner parties and parties, and the ex-wife doesn't hear from old friends from one year to the next, and maybe just gets a Christmas card addressed to them alone, so they know that the divorce has filtered out in terms of, you know, public information, but there hasn't been any hand of friendship extended to them, and that can be very scary. That can feel very very worrying. I remember reading Richard E. Grant talking about, obviously, a slightly different situation where his wife died, and his wife was very unwell in the build up to that. And he wrote this very poignant comment, which he said, you know, you don't want to keep score, but you can't help it. You know, who were the people who did bring casseroles around when my wife was having this particular treatment? And who were the people who crossed over on the other side of the street? And divorced women will often talk about a similar experience of being completely cut dead by friends of 30 years standing, and how you deal with that. You know, do you just accept that there are some people who are just not very decent people, and so all of that has to be taken into account. If you have children, how will they cope with the split? Is it better for you to stay and endure, or does that send the wrong message to your children? Is it better to say, actually, I'm not going to be treated with contempt any longer, and I'm gonna role model that to you, my children? So there are lots of different variations.
Yeah, I know that is very, very true, and it's really important that actually you look at how your relationship is affecting others who are living in your household, and the signals and the messages that says that this standard of behaviour is acceptable, because you're condoning it, and actually, you know, of course, fundamentally it isn't. Before we go, Lucy, I'm aware that we're running out of time, but it's just such a privilege to have you here and talk to you. This is a word that I'd love to just touch on, because we're hearing about it a lot. And I mean, maybe it's just my Instagram algorithm, but I get a load of notifications on this. And that is narcissism, and identifying narcissistic behavior or spotting a narcissist. How, you know, kind of in a nutshell, what is that? Why are we hearing so much about it? And how do we identify if we are in fact living with a narcissist, and does it matter?
Well, yeah, third question last. Yes, it matters hugely, because they will never change. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm sure they'll be different when the kids leave home, I'm sure they'll be different when we go away on holiday, I'm sure after his mum, you know, stops living with us, everything will go back to normal. But actually, the narcissist is a very particular type of personality disorder. We're hearing about it more because people are frankly talking about it more. As you said, your kids' generation are putting content out there on social media saying, this isn't right. Whoever thought this was right? And here's my TikTok, you know, video about it, or here's my reel about it. So that's why we're hearing more about it. But for sure, it's really important to try to work out whether the person you're with is basically just living their life for them. And the key components of narcissism are they're very manipulative. So you're always to blame. They are never to blame. They have this mysterious inability to be to blame for anything. And they'll often come from families that don't have, you know, they're not to blame. It's always everybody else. It's always the other side of the family that's to blame. So they're very manipulative, they're very contemptuous, and they get their energy from the attention and the adoration and the connection that you give them. They're not so great at giving that back to you, although often with a narcissist you'll get it at the very beginning, which again goes back to this love bombing idea, where they will exquisitely, very quickly, because they in a funny way are also people pleasers, but they're only people pleasers for their own ends. So they are able to read people very quickly and say the things that the other person wants to hear, provide the things that the other person wants. So for example, if you're on a dating website and you're struggling with your mortgage, they will work that out very quickly and will say, oh, but you don't need to worry about that, I can pay your mortgage. And you're like, oh my God, this is too good to be true. There is a reason for that, because it is too good to be true. So the person who in the beginning appears to meet all your needs and is so loving and so giving, all about you, because they've worked out what to say very, very quickly. They will remove that energy from the relationship as soon as they realize that you're in, that as soon as they realize that you're hooked in. And you'll spend the rest of your days with them, which could be 2 weeks or it could be 20 years, trying to get back to that early level of sort of connection, which felt so amazing. But actually all you're doing is you're feeding them, you're feeding their narcissism. We call it the narcissistic feed. And very interestingly, from a purely psychological point of view, often if you end up with someone who's a narcissist, that often speaks to the fact that one of your parents was a narcissist as well. Although I don't want to say that happens in every case, but it happens a lot. And if you look back and you think to yourself, I could never get my mother's attention, I was never good enough for my dad, or whatever it was, right, the chances are they were in it for themselves, and you've ended up with a similar type of partner where you're very skilled at the giving, but you're not getting very much back. And it's really important to be alert to it, and it's really important to get out.
Does a narcissist recognize that in themselves, and is this something they're doing?
No, because they're so amazing.
Go out to love bomb and catch you, and then withdraw. Is it a deliberate strategy, or is it something that they're completely unaware of and can maybe hopefully fix with a bit of therapy?
Well, yes, but of course they then become very narcissistic in therapy. So the therapist thinks, oh my God, they're just so amazing. They're such a good patient. They're really good. They show up on time, they always pay the bill, they're really engaged. But the clue is they never take responsibility for anything negative. And so it's really, really hard to chip away at their, you know, incredibly, for them it's very important. They feel very inferior, very, you know, the narcissist is perpetually a sort of 3 to 5 year old child who's desperately damaged, definitely wounded. And they built this carapace around them to be this, you know, high functioning damaged person. And so it's very hard for them to take ownership of their behavior. And this is why I'm sort of talking about that kind of person in my TED talk. The person who says, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I can't bear the fact that I've broken your heart by cheating on you. I will do everything in my power to change. I will be just the perfect partner. And then they do it again, and then they do it again, because they can't really believe that they're in the wrong. And as I say, it's really important to get out, or it's really important to notice whether you've got a pattern of being in relationships with narcissists, because that's something that you can change. Right. You might not be able to change them, but you can definitely change yourself.
And presumably one of the signs that somebody is not a narcissist or is not operating in that way is somebody who is very genuinely able to say, hands up, I messed up, I got that wrong, or can take ownership for their failings and is not afraid to show a sign of weakness in front of you.
Yes, I mean, as a hard and fast rule, yes, someone who is able to do that. But my worry is that sometimes you can take on too much blame. Actually, you can almost, again, you're accepting the blame for the narcissist, and that doesn't really help you. But I think it's very important, because the narcissist will often accept blame for really minor stuff, as a way of sort of showing willing and trying to give the impression that they are a decent human being after all. And invariably they're great people. They are lovely people, and they are damaged in their own way. So obviously, as a therapist, I can understand them, but in a relationship, they're very, very toxic.
Can they be fixed?
Well, I would like to believe that they can, but it does really depend how effective any kind of therapeutic intervention is. And what happens more often is that ultimately the relationship they're in ends, and then they just move on to their next victim, although their victim doesn't realize that they've become a victim. In fact, that person thinks, how on earth did that previous wife or husband let this person go, because they are so amazing, they're so perfect. I just don't understand that. So for them, that they'll just be thinking Christmas has come early, and the narcissist doesn't need to change. So that's very sad.
Lucy, honestly, I know that we've overrun. Thank you for your time. It's so interesting, and I can see from all the comments here that everybody's really, really enjoying this conversation. If you are a subscriber to the magazine, you will, of course, be able to read Lucy's brilliant article. But where else can we find you, Lucy? You talked about your TED Talk. I know people want to pick up in this conversation. Where are the best points of contact?
Well, it would be amazing to hear from people here on Instagram. I'm at the Lucy Beresford 1. I'm on Twitter at Lucy Beresford, and my website, lucyberesford.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for today. It's
My
so
pleasure.
brilliant. And thank you for contributing to the magazine. Thank you for recording a brilliant podcast. And I'd love to chat to you again. I think this is a subject that we should really come back and explore again, because it's obviously hit a lot of nerves, I can see from the comments. So thank you.
I'd love that too. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. You've got to press the little square on the top right-hand corner. Thank you so much for all your comments there. That is very, very interesting. I can see that there was a lot of engagement and a lot of people really got a lot out of that. So just to say, if you are a subscriber and you do have your proper copy, not just a printed page like I have, then do turn towards the end, because the article that Lucy has written is absolutely brilliant. If you are perhaps overseas like I am at the moment, or you want to download your digital edition, you can do that, and that's something that you will always have there online on your phone or your iPad or wherever you are. Certainly well worth doing. If you are yet subscribed, there is an amazing deal at the moment, which my team have just told me about, which I can't actually quite believe it's true, but apparently it is. If you subscribe today, you get 6 issues for the price of 5. So you get a free one, you get free UK postage and packing with that. And there is an amazing Olverum firming body oil as a free gift, which is worth £36, which is more than the price of the subscription. So if you're thinking maybe about Christmas presents, for example, you could keep the subscription for yourself and pass on the gift, or other way around. So really, really interesting. I love some of the comments coming in here. Victoria says, great, I finally understand what gaslighting is. Yeah, I mean, just so many interesting things. Trisha says, hello, Liz, I received your beautiful magazine. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, so Lucy's website. So she is the Lucy Beresford on social media. So I think if you head there, and I know that she does have a great TED Talk as well, so do take a listen to that if you would like to. And I know that if you look up Lucy Beresford on YouTube, you'll also find quite a few things. And of course, if you check the Earle Wellbeing Show, the podcast, there is a very, very good episode, an archive episode that we recorded together. Right, just before I go, just to say the next Instagram Live has actually been moved to Friday. So it's not Thursday this week, it is Friday, same time, different location in Kenya. So I hope that you will join me there. Couple of quick reminders. The last Instagram Live I did had an amazing, amazing response. This is all about Nachido time. If you listen to Dr. Nicola Conlan talking to me about NAD, otherwise known as NAD+, absolutely fascinating. In fact, I had a message from a senior member of my team just now to say, oh my gosh, I was away, but I've just listened to the Instagram Live. Incredibly convincing science, and I've just ordered using the Liz Love. So highly, highly recommend it. And the other one, of course, that I'm loving at the moment, which has made it into my bag, my travel bag, is the MV Skin Therapy. This is the Rose Plus Booster. thousands and thousands of rose petals all squished into one little teeny tiny bottle. So restorative. It is absolutely incredible. And of course, there is Liz Love's discount codes on all of those. And if you want to check out any of the codes, don't forget you can go to the mothership, which is lizearlewellbeing.com/Liz Earle and then Liz Loves, and you'll find all the different offers that are available at the moment across such a wide range of supplements and wellness things. So I'll be back with you on Friday. We're going to be talking about makeup. Yeah, why not? So we're going to be doing something very interesting, looking at foundations and concealers and the best way to get the glow in a really natural way. We've also got a very, very good new podcast coming out at the moment. And if you're interested in relationships, the last one that I did with Philippa Perry, also a psychotherapist, talking about navigating conflict. We've had some amazing comments about that as well. That's gone down really well. So do take a listen. Thank you for being with me today. And I look forward to seeing you back here, same time, different day, back live on Friday. Thank you for all the hearts. I send you hearts back. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you. Take care. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.